This week we are extremely lucky to have author Ely Percy with us to discuss their new book, Duck Feet. Welcome to the show. It's nice to have you.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. The book itself, we've kind of covered a number of representations of working class life through various mediums and artistic disciplines and stuff like that. So it's nice to actually welcome you in, because it kind of carries on in that respect, but it's also, I think the book covers a completely different perspective to something that is, natural to both me and Paul. So it's something that we're quite excited to get into today. We normally do the whole first day of work thing where we get you to introduce yourself and whatnot, but I think having, interacted with the book, it sounds as though there's a lot of you in it already, so I think if it's all right with you, we'll just kind of dive in.
Yeah, sure.
So I just kind of broadly speaking, how would you, describe the book to, the folk listening?
It's a coming of age novel told in a series of sort of short episodes from the point of view of a 12-year-old girl, Kirsty Campbell, as she goes through high school in Renfrew in 2001 to 2006. Well, it goes right to 2007 because it goes to the summer holidays. And I think part one is first year, then it jumps to fourth year, and then it's her sixth year of high school, and it sort of covers if you can imagine Grange Hill or Biker Grove, but in a book in Scottish. It's like Kirsty's a wallflower. She's a narrator, but the book's no about her most of the time. It's about she's this wee lassie that's pretty ordinary. She's not top of the class, but she's no daft. She's not super shy, but she's not really outgoing either. And it's just really all about what she sees her pals going through and what she sees people in about her. And it's about making choices and growing up, really.
Was there a deliberate choice to make it sort of first, fourth, and sixth year?
I think when I was first starting to write it was just short stories. I just started off writing one short story because there was a call out for new writing on, I think it was shoes, and I'm just sitting writing high heels and brogues and all that. And I wrote this one short story about a wee lassie that goes to the sunbaths. And then I thought I really liked doing it. I really liked her voice, so I thought I'll write another story, and I wrote about French class. So it was all kind of, I knew she was 12. I just kept going, and I remember I was talking to Scottish author Zoe Strachan, and I was going to go through keep going through all her high school years, and Zoe's just but why? Why? What happens in second year that's that important? I thought that's a good point. Why would I do every single high school year? Why not just skip to the big stuff? Which for me, when you're in first year, your most important thing is sort of who your pals are, who's your best pal. You've started high school, and you maybe get 12. You maybe get your pals that's been all through primary, and you're going to high school, and you get your new classes and new friends and all these new people from different places. And then but in fourth year, and also you're worrying about you don't want to get a punny in case your mum finds out, you don't get in trouble with the teachers. You're still at that sort of precautious stage where you want to get everything right. But when you jump to fourth year, it's you're maybe that wee bit more confident. You've developed a bit. You've now established new pals. You've got your exams. I think second and third year is still a sort of training period in between. And it's also a wee bit if you don't see somebody between they're 12 and they're 15, and then you meet them after 3 years, it's wow, they're all grown up. How did they get to be this wee cute prepubescent person, and then they're all hormones, and then I think at 17 you're not quite an adult, but you're oh, see my mom, she's this, and my dad doesn't know what he's talking about, and the teachers are rubbish, and I think there's kind of stages.
Absolutely, that's what kind of I had sort of thought, is that they're very important stages. And I can remember coming back after summer into fifth year and feeling like I was an adult, and I think that's what you're saying there, sort of 16, 17, you're almost you think that you're ready, you think that you see things the same as the adults see them, but you really don't, looking back now, you think wow.
Living with a 17-year-old just now, that is 60% of my day in lockdown is trying to convince them that no, you don't actually know everything just quite yet. You know what I mean? So obviously in the build up to this, we've been talking quite a bit back and forth, and it sounds to me as though Duck Feet is being a bit early, but I love you. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Yeah, 16 years.
I mean, a level of patience that I just don't understand. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Like, so fair play to you for actually sticking in with it. Like,
how do you find that level of sort of determination that Matt's talking about, like the patience? Like, I've previously played in bands and I've been songs after 15 minutes. I'm like, nah, like it's not working. Like, put it in the bin. But for somebody to hear somebody take on like a creative project that's lasted 16 years and complete it, like, where do you find that sort of resolve? And was there ever points when you were doing it that you thought, like, this is just not worth it, or I'm just going to like forget about this?
I think with Duck Feet, it was because I was having such a good time writing the stories, and it took about a year to do the first draft, and there was 65 of them. And I used to go to this sort of literary night called Read Aloud in Shawlands and Chayovna, and every month I'd be invited back. And there was one month where my friend Dave Manderson, who ran it, was just like, maybe don't read this month and give somebody else a shot. And then folk were like, "Where's the Duck Feet stories?" And it's just like, actually, you want to read again next month. And I think it was the audience, it was people's interaction that was just saying, oh, what's going to happen with Kirsty, what's going to happen with Charlene, what they're going to do next. Is that Charlene? She's a bloody idiot, you know. I could strangle her. And I think it was just, when people were giving me the feedback, I was using that for the next story. I was, okay, I've listened to what everybody's saying, and I spoke to so many people, so asking them questions, and I just took on board what people were saying, and I thought, if other people like this, then a publisher's going to like it. There's lots of small press magazines that I'd send out one story and they would take it and they were like, we really love this, we really like this. And then I would send a publisher for the whole thing, and folk were like, no, nobody's going to read this. Really important for Scotland, but nobody in the rest of the world was going to read this. And, you know, see if you wrote it in English, maybe it'd get published. And I'm like, no, I am going to write this book the way that we talk. And somebody will like it. And I just knew, I think I stopped sending it out as a whole thing for a long, long time. And I said, once I get to like 30, I think it was 30 stories. I said, once I get to like 30 stories, that's it. And I think I ended up with about 35 published. And then Monstrous Regiment came to me and said, could you novelise it? So that was out of the blue. Yeah.
I think as well, like when you're talking about that reaction for people in the audience at the open mic nights, like I think that's kind of reflected in the response that I've seen online to the people who have just started having, you know, their books land this week. I think there was somebody yesterday who was like live tweeting our reactions to like your characters and how they were interacting with each other as they were sort of reading the book that your publisher was promoting yesterday. And like the thread was just absolutely amazing. And I think it kind of reflects that when people are reading it, they're actually seeing and hearing themselves in it and actually like getting involved with it, which I thought was really cool. I've never actually seen somebody live tweet a book they were reading before, so that was cool.
Yeah, I think it's really funny. One of the characters, Charlene, who's Kirsty's best friend since primary one, lots of people have been texting me going, I fucking hate that Charlene, she's a wee cow, I'm going to bat her in the mouth. And I'm like, oh, calm down, she's 12, you know, you're 40.
Aye.
So many people have just been like, don't like her. And they've been really like passionately sort of like against her. So it's really funny to...
Aye,
that's just must be a sign of a good character, because like it's almost like that whole thing when I mean, I work with various other podcasts, and one of the things I say to them is that don't worry if you find people sort of saying bad things about your podcast, because it means that you're doing something right.
Yeah.
So just the fact that your characters get an emotional reaction must tell you something, that they're good characters. Aye. And it's well written.
People are buying into them. One of the things that you and I actually spoke about a fair bit, obviously in the build up to this, you know, you had this 16-year wait to get this out. You go to the finish line, and I think, what was it, your foot you broke right on the day before the launch?
My ankle.
Then we've had a few issues with.
Oh,
it was the day of the launch.
I was like on that day, people had been tweeting me all morning, and it'd been about 4 hours I was on Twitter solidly. Couldn't get off because somebody would message me again with something else. And I was like, no, I need to go out and do something. I'm really restless because I had nothing to do. What do you do in the day of the launch? And I was just like, I've got all this energy. I'll go out for a run. I'm tweeting, right, sees later, I'm away for a run, book launches in a few hours. I was out. If I said I was out for 5 minutes, I'd be exaggerating. It took me that time to get down 4 flights of stairs, ran along the pavement, tripped, did a Superman dive. All these people were coming over saying, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." I was like, "I can move my toes, I'm fine." Sat myself up on a wonky bench and was like texting my partner, "You need to come get me, help me up the stairs. I can't move." I was like, and she went away for a shower. And like, I'm just sitting there, and people are coming up going, "Do you need a hand? Do you want a taxi?" And I'm like, "No, I literally live up the stairs." I couldn't get up. And then I was saying to my friend Julie, who did the launch, and she's a nurse, and she's just like, "Your ankle doesn't sound right." And I'm like, "No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine." I was like, I mean, I kind of get my shoe on, and I heard a crunch, but it's fine. And she's like, "No, I think you need to phone NHS 24. So I did, and they're like, "Oh, you need to come to accident emergency." And I'm like, "But it's my book launch. I can't. I'll just leave it later." And I'm saying to Paisley Book Festival, "Oh, I've had a bit of an accident." And we're like, "Well, we need to know by 6 o'clock if you're doing this." So I just went, "Aye, I'll be there in a taxi, put on the good coat." Was like having to help getting dressed, got all dressed up to go with the coat on, because I feel like it was a book launch. I should get dressed up for the book launch, just sit in a pair of pajamas. And I went, and I'm still like buzzing, thinking I'm fine. I was like, "What's the nonsense about it? It's a sprained ankle. I've done it before." And the wee nurse is just like, "Aye, you broke your ankle." I was just like, "What?" So it's not even sore. I was like, just can't walk on it. But I went through the whole launch still on adrenaline. And it was the next day, I was just like, I've never felt pain like this. And
you certainly didn't show it on the launch video, so
no, I was just absolutely buzzing. But it was really weird because I was at a strange angle. I had my foot up, and it was the computer was at this really strange angle, and I thought, see if I could have planned it. I wanted a nice bookcase behind me. I was going to design the set. Here's like a windmill, and I literally made it back in time, like just for the tech rehearsal. And I had people texting me saying, "I can't get into your launch because they said I didn't book." And I'm like, I can't help you. I'm literally just back from A&E, haven't eaten anything all day, and I'm like, I can't. I've got 5 minutes to get ready. And I don't even know what happened with some folk, because I'm just like, "Sorry, no, I have to block you now."
That's incredible, man. That's a story to go along. Like the book becomes a legend. You've got this amazing story to tell about how you broke your leg on the day of the book launch. But fair play, like mad dedication. Like
the show must go on, eh?
I just think people had been waiting. There had been people that knew me for 16 years ago that had come every month to Chaiovna and got involved in the Duck Feet stories. People who I'd asked questions, I'd interviewed them, who'd had their bit, who'd had a little bit of their high school life sort of like put into the book. For me to turn around and go like, I'm not doing it, that's rubbish.
Seems unthinkable, doesn't it? So I think, like, maybe just moving on to the book itself, I think you touched on earlier on, setting Renfrew, obviously, a lot being made, particularly in the launch and stuff, about it being a working class area. Obviously, we come from a similar background, but I think what strikes me about the books is what's different about us, our experience being in the city, obviously, yours being out with that. And I did quite like actually hearing like a Scottish book that is not just about, as you say, Glasgow, Edinburgh, whatever it is, like big city. There is more tears than that. Was it a deliberate choice to keep it, where you grew up, or were you just sticking to like what you knew?
It was deliberate. I mean, I think when I wrote the first story, it was just a stream of consciousness, and it was like that for about 10 stories, where it was just this voice, this wee girl, and I was just going pick another subject. When I hit about 10 stories, I was just like, right, okay, Renfrew has never, to my knowledge, nobody's written a book about Renfrew. Nobody's written a book about people that, that I grew up with. And I think there are lots of really great books, set in other places. But I thought, why not? Why not? I mean, Alan Bissett wrote about Falkirk, and I love his stuff. I love how bouncy it is and how energetic, and that really resonates with me. But I don't come from Falkirk, so the actual place was sort of alien to me. And I thought, well, it's easy for me to, I like reading a book where I can read about the streets that I've walked down. So I thought to write about Ard Road and Lagan Terrace and all the places in Kirky and Renfrew, and certainly that's feedback I've had to people as well who come who went to high school with me and stuff, were just like, and there's one woman, I don't know if you've seen it, that kept saying, that's the house opposite me, it's in your book club. And I was like, do you know what, I thought it was Leiden Square, but the publisher on that are saying no, it's a different street, right? I think. And there was a whole debate on it, and she finally got her book, took a photo of it, and she's like, that's the house, that is literally the house opposite to me.
I did see the side-by-side picture.
Yeah, and it's really, really strange. Out of all the houses that they could have chose, do you know, years ago, those two Waynes were outside playing in front of that close. One of them climbed a drain pipe and got their leg stuck. The fire brigade had to come and cut them out, and front page of the Paisley Express, and it was me. I had to get cut out with the fire brigade. They could not have actually chosen a better. I was like, I cannot believe that is what they've chosen as the front cover, because none of the team in Monsters Regiment are for Scott, or for Renfrew. I don't know where Hannah's from actually, but definitely not Renfrew anyway. But Lauren and Ellen are American and Irish, so they've never been to Renfrew.
That's
incredible. We were going to do a tour, but
that's amazing. That's so amazing. I mean, that's the type of story that you still hear people talk about. Oh, mind that time, such and such. Like, I can pure picture that, like something happening like that when we were younger as well. But for then to end up in the front of your book or the cover of your book, like that's almost like written in the stars, isn't it?
I couldn't believe it. I mean, there was loads of people were saying, I think it's this place and that place, and I'm like, I'm not the right person. I can't visualize stuff, so I'm not the right person to think. If you're saying that isn't that place that I've thought it was, then obviously I'm wrong. But that woman's just like, no, that's the house opposite me. I couldn't believe that was what they chose. That's brilliant.
There was a part of the book that I really enjoyed, because my wife comes from out with Glasgow as well, and the way she talks about everybody kind of knowing everybody's business, and just that kind of more sort of not rural, because it's not probably the right word, but I don't know what the right word is for these towns and villages on the outskirts, satellite towns or whatever, I don't know. And she describes it being quite claustrophobic. So she comes from a place also called Kirky, that she describes as almost like a tiny village, when it's actually a really big sort of geographical area. And the bit I picked up on was when you were talking about the boy Willie being missing. And I'm not going into too much of the detail, but obviously, the scene is the kids are kind of kicking about, sort of speculating about, how where he is and what's happened to him and blah blah blah. And the end result is, sort of surprisingly mundane, but compared to what they're imagining. It reminded me a wee bit of the sort of stereophonic song, Thousand Trees, where it only takes one match to burn 1,000 trees, and that's a comment on the mentality of town and sort of village living. So it really does have that authenticity for me, which I really enjoyed.
I think Wally in particular is one of my favourite characters, and you don't really get to know him until quite near the end of the book, because he's a boy that everybody, you get to know about Wally. He's known by his reputation, and he's not exactly the way that you expect him to be, because he's mad mental Willie McCoy, see his name on lampposts and stuff like that, and the teachers don't like him because he's as Willie says in the book himself, because his dad's been in jail and all his uncles have been in jail and half his family's been in the fucking jail, so they all think I'm going to end up in the jail. And this is he has got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, but yeah, you hear about him rather than from him for most of the book.
Aye. Such a common thing, and when you grow up in that high school environment, the reputations and the mentions, that was something that was really vivid for me as well.
I think that's something that I've never really even thought about this, but surely that's a bad thing. 12-year-olds. I remember going to high school, and the first day of high school, the teacher did a round round the room and went, who's your family member that's been to the school? Basically what they're doing is scoping you out.
Yeah.
Who's the troublemakers? You're like sitting there as a 12-year-old. I've never even like thought about that, but it's such a strange thing. But it's real. Like it does follow people about.
It's like the teachers when I was at school, and well, I went to different high schools, but certainly in the first high school I went to, it was just like, oh yes, I know your father, or oh yes, and I didn't get it as much as other people that I knew got it. It was just like, oh, you're a whatever family name, I've got my eye in you sort of thing. And it's just like, that's your whole, that's your story being written before you've even, like, you've hardly been there.
Aye. It's going to be rough.
Aye, when we get to know the kids and they're all right. There's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, their dad was a ruffian, but they're fine, and like they're just misunderstood. Like that must happen so much to kids. Or I think what's coming up for me would be even worse is they would start to play up to that reputation. They feel like, I need to be the troublemaker. Yeah. Well, if I'm going to get painted as it before I've even begun, then I may as well just do it. Yeah. And I think that's a shame, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Putting it
in loads of people. I mean, as I said, I spoke to loads and loads of people, and it was the same stories were coming out that I was hearing. So I thought, okay, I'll write the most common stories that folk are telling me, and that was one of them.
Excellent. One of the things, obviously following the launch and stuff like that I was quite interested by is that you were there alongside other working class writers who have had really great years, and I think that you're feeling it almost like a kind of new spectrum in terms of how we like look at ourselves. Like Graham, with like a kind of cis white male experience to working class. Douglas, obviously, with the gay man's experience to the working class. Obviously yourself and teenage girls and the experience of that, but again, all sort of framed in that sort of working class, and it steps away from like that very narrow kind of like grim depiction we've had of ourselves over the years, and like it's got to be quite exciting to be part of this that's clearly going on now, as we're starting to look at ourselves in new ways and explore ourselves in like different voices.
I think one of the things that was important to me was, well, it was very important to write it in a Renfrew voice, and I know that when I was growing up, my mum would say, oh, speak properly, speak nicely, always say please and thanks, don't say aye, don't say no, don't say that, you sound like trash, speak properly, you'll never get a job. And I spoke to loads of other people who said that their parents would say, do not say that, you'll never get a job, or don't say that when you're in school, you never get anywhere. And then you go to high school as well, and the teachers would decide if you said aye or no, you're no use. If you can't speak properly, get my class or get my site. And it was such a shame, because you were conditioned to think that you must speak in the Queen's English, or you're not worth anything. And I think I became quite angry about that as I was sort of 19, 20 and going into college, and you're getting handed Jim Kelman, and it's just like, oh, actually, hang on a wee second, that book won the Booker Prize and I'm allowed to use these words. Yeah. So I'm like, no way. But I decided when I was writing it that there would be no sort of critique of Kirsty's accent or the other people. No, I don't think there's anybody anywhere in the whole book that says to anybody you're not speaking properly, or there's nothing, because I didn't want that. I thought, no, let's celebrate the language. Yes, those things were said. Yes, that happened. Yes, lots of editors said to me, change it into proper English and not slang. But I thought, why put the attention on that? Why not just make it, about being Scottish and about, obviously it's not all good things that happen in the book, but I thought, no, I'm not giving that attention.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's a barrier that this latest sort of wave of Scottish literature is going to kind of break? I mean, we've seen it very recently, even with I don't know if you remember Piers Morgan's reaction to Loki on Question Time.
Oh no, I just ignore him.
What happened was, I mean, clearly Darren McGarvey's an intelligent guy, hyper intelligent. We've had him on this podcast. Yeah, exactly. And he was on a Question Time episode. I think they were in Dundee, and they were speaking about working class and classism. And Piers Morgan just tweeted, I'm not even going to listen to what this guy's got to say. I can't basically just ripped the piss out his accent. Like, where did this guy grow up? I can't understand him. But then what was funny was Darren subtweeted him, and when Piers Morgan realised that he's popular, he's got something to say, and he's a published writer, social commentaries, he basically came back like, oh, I didn't mean it like that. But that's almost like the wall that's met when Scottish people, I mean, I always remember Billy Connolly going to America when I was a wee boy, and him coming on the TV and being like, oh, yes and no, and my dad being like, who the fuck does he think he is? He's forgot his arse. Like, where's the Glaswegian accent, mate? But then on the flip side, I was getting the same sort of treatment that you were talking about, where if I was like, da, he'd be like, don't talk like that, people won't take you seriously. So there's almost like a sort of weird clash that was happening amongst our peers. My parents were like, no, I want to hear you speaking your Glasgow accent, but when I was growing up, they're like, no, speak properly. And it's almost like you need to change yourself so that people will accept you. When in fact, what we're seeing now is that people love it. Like music, art, books, everything's coming out now in Scots. It's so good to see.
God, there's like TikTok channels in Scots now. You know what I mean? Like,
I think with my family, I think with the parents and stuff like that, it wasn't coming from a place of being nasty. It was absolute terror that your Wayne was going to no get a job, and they'd lived through the sort of the unemployment of the 80s. My dad like worked in a factory and lost his job, was unemployed for a long time, and I just think that they're absolutely desperate for you to do better than what they did and to be accepted. And it was funny because my mum always bought me the Bruns Annual and the Ur Wullie every year and got the Sunday Post and would say, have you read your Ur Wullie in the Sunday Post? And I was like, I think that's probably why I can read all the sort of Doric books and different things now. And I really, really love reading anything that's in the sort of any kind of like Scottish dialects. I've read everything from Doric to Dundonian, and like it just takes a wee while for your ear to
that's it.
Sort of get.
Because there's no standard unit of measure. It's just about getting out the first couple of pages, and then you're in that flow, aren't you? One of the things you touched on, a few questions back, was that there were other Scottish authors who you looked at and had, quite an upbeat kind of tone to hit their work, and that was something that, again, when we're talking about, the traditional way we look at like Scots literature, that I feel like Duckfeet kind of like pushes back against, because I watched you there reading the first chapter, and maybe later on, if it's all right with you, we might ask you to do it again if we've got time. And I was really struck by like the pure bright sort of bouncy nature of the voice. And although I know the book does touch on some very serious topics down the line, and we'll get to that in a wee minute, like I was really taken by like how engaging, and like it was very much like I was listening to a young girl experience kind of like the firsts of the world with like kind of, wide-eyed wonder in a lot of respects. So that's something, again, I really liked about it. But as I say, there was some, serious topics covered in the book. I mean, why did you think it was important to like explore them through the lens of like a teenage girl's perspective?
I think when Kirsty starts out, she's 12 and she first going to high school, and her worries are quite trivial, like, no getting a punny, worrying about who are you going to sit next to for your packed lunch and stuff like that. And as you get older, I think your world expands, and you meet new people, and like she's not got a clue what she wants to do with her life. She just knows that, the things that her pals are doing just really aren't what she wants. She's got pals that are talking about they want to go to uni and study music and all. It's just like, well, I'm not really that academic. I don't want to do that. But I also I'm not like Charlene. She's just out smoking and drinking, and I'm not that either. And I think there's a real worry about, God, I'm getting on. I'm going to be leaving school soon. What am I going to do with myself? And I also think as well, you kind of, if you're from a small town and you've maybe not got a lot of money, or your parents are maybe no academic, they don't read loads, I think you kind of get ground down, or you get lost, and like she sees a lot of her friends that are not encouraged to do stuff like Charlene. There's a lot of neglect and stuff, and she sees her sort of going down and down and slipping down, getting into more trouble, and she just watches it to the side. But then I think as the book goes on as well, she starts to sort of think more about herself and her own future. So I think
the one thing that school doesn't actually prepare us for is leaving school and going out into the real world. You know what I mean? Like,
It's true.
Yeah.
especially around about that time. Things might have changed. It's been a while since I've been there, but I came out of school and thought to myself, the one thing they'd ever taught me today was to survive outside of school. You know what I mean?
I think like something I laughed there when you said that she's getting on, and we're talking about a 17-year-old, but this is the pressure. Like, I think that if this one of the themes of the book, and probably like really like sort of current, is that people do feel like this sort of strange thing, like have it all figured out by the time you're 16, or else like, oh. And I think what you're saying there, if I'm getting this right, it's almost like a sort of working class thing. It's like a panic. Panic button gets hit at that sort of 15, 16, 17. Do you want to stay on? Do you want to go and do this or do that? And I just thought that was really funny there, the way, and that is the way that we look at it, is like, oh, well, you're 18 now, you know what I mean? You're like, the full world's in front of you.
Yeah, imagine you're somebody that's all your days started scrimped and scraped and really struggled to get a job. You maybe have been a cleaner or a dustman or a road sweeper like my dad, and you can never, you work really hard, but you can never really sort of elevate yourself. And then your mate comes in one day and says, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a poet, and you're like, it's just like, aye, right, yeah. I get it, and it's like, it's just not part of their world. It's never been part of their world, because writing is supposed to be for the middle class. So you'd have like my parents going, oh, that's lovely, that's nice as a hobby. You know, maybe you can get a job with a newspaper. And I'm like, no, I want to write books, I want to write poetry, I want to write short stories. And they're like, well, I don't know. We don't know how to help with that. It's just not, it's just completely out with their experience, and they worry and they think, well, how are you going to make any money at that? And of course, on the other side of it, you hear about people getting their first book and they get this massive advance, and that is not realistic for most people either.
Yeah.
It's a different, we live in a different world now, especially when it comes to the arts, especially like you've got things like, I mean, you could go and read all day if you wanted on the internet. You could go and read short stories and by proper established authors as well. So it's almost like that idea, music, it's happening across the board in the arts. Like the money's just going, and it's people that are left with passions. Like something that really resonated that you were talking about there is that I get really discouraged to go into music. Like I actually get more encouragement about taking a management position at McDonald's at 17 than what I did to pursue my dream, and had a full conversation with my parents where they were like, well, why don't you just go and do that at McDonald's and then you can do your music? And I was like, no, fuck that. Like, no. And then a year later, my dad telling me that all he ever wanted was a guitar, and all he ever wanted was to play music. And it's like, but you actively discouraged me to do that. Like that was your dream, and you'll get these memories that you're telling me now. But I think it's exactly what you said. You've hit the nail right in the head. How are you going to make money?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what it feels like. The life sort of whittles down to it. It's like, are you making enough money? And oh, you'll be all right if you make enough money. But we're almost like we're rewriting that, and it's like, no, like go and try and find your dreams, and you know, the money isn't everything. And if the money comes, fantastic. But what was your family's? Was that your family's reaction when you were like, I want to be a writer? Was it like, oh Christ, like, here we go?
I think I'd had stuff published since I was like 15, in magazines, and it was just like they were all like, oh yeah, that's really good. I mean, I remember like the first thing I ever had published was in Big magazine, a teenage magazine, 1993. I think 1994, and I'd gone into school. I wrote to Big, Victor Bogoff's column every single week. I was in the hospital and I used to write, this is shite, the world is shite, everybody's shite, you know. And I try to make it rhyme and all this, and I'd send letters every week. Never thought, you know, it'd ever get read. I thought there must be thousands of people writing. And one day, it was just after Christmas, I'd gone back to school, and this lassie that I kind of knew was a year above me came running, you're famous. And I'm like, what? You're in Big magazine. And then I was, my little like 6-line kind of poem letter thing that, and I'm like, all right, right, brilliant. And I never wrote anything for quite a wee while after. Well, I never sent anything out for a wee while after that. But the next thing was a poem in Sugar or Bliss or some other teenage magazine that I was writing, and my mum sent it in. My mum actually sent it in. It was on homelessness. Was it I know about homelessness, you know? But I'd written this about worrying about I was 17 and where was I going to go and live and stuff like that. And she sent it in, and then I just started sending things to other places. And I think that was fine. People were happy that I was doing something myself, you know. But I was still at school, and you know, I never made any money about it. You'd sometimes get a magazine or a book that they send you. I think when I started to say, I'd say in school, I'm going to be a writer and older, and you just seem like folk would be like, who's going to want to read anything you write? You know. And then there would be teachers who would be like, don't be such an idiot, just get on with your work. We were never encouraged to write short stories or anything like that in school. No. It was, you know, you were. I think we get The Great Gatsby, Bold. That's the 2 books we did. It must have been a third one, and the one we chose ourselves. And I remember somebody doing train spotting, and it was an absolute fight for this lassie to get to do train spotting. And you know, it's absolutely crazy. But nobody was encouraging at all. It wasn't until I went to like college and did like an adult sort of a learner course in creative writing at college, and I came in and I was just like, I wanted to learn creative writing. The tutor was just like, okay, you know. And the class was actually a class for folk that went in, and they were just wanting a free swipe with their card and all that. It was a class that you could come in for 5 minutes and get your assignment and go home. And I wanted to stay in the class and listen and be like, what we're doing. And my tutor was just like, you are different. And that was, my tutor was Dave Manderson, who's a writer, and he ran the reading aloud at Chai Obna. Absolutely brilliant.
Nice.
Yeah.
Big shout out to him, given where I'm doing. So as we're sort of heading towards, you know, sort of wrapping up, like what is it that you want people to take away from Duck Feet when they've read it?
I think hopefully that they'll feel hope that just because you come from a small town or talk with a regional accent does not mean that you're any less than anybody else. You're just as good, just as valid, and just as important as somebody that, you know, lives and is middle class and, you know, read loads of books, and you can be a writer, or you know, you're allowed to do that as well. You can write books the way you speak. You do not have to write about like being middle class. You can, you know, I'd love somebody to read the book and go, oh, I get it. I want to write, you know, I want to write my story, or I want to write about people like me as well and have a shot. I think that would be nice.
Aye, I think that's like the most sort of purest intention of any art, is that it inspires other people to pursue their own art, really. And I think that's probably why the work's so good. Apart from the labour you've put into it, clearly, like 16 years worth of work, like it's incredible to think. But I love that. Like, you're just doing your art to try and inspire others to do it, and inspire young people. Like, I think that's a great message for people to take away if they read it. When they read it. Whereabouts can they? Sorry.
There was I ended up going into a college class one time. It was my tutor Dave, his wife took a class for kids that had been kicked out of school, that, or, you know, sort of edged out of school. They were all like 15, but they couldn't really leave at the same time. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? I don't know what you want me to go in and talk to this class. And they're like, just go in and read Duck Feet. And there was an absolute ramming in the class. And then I came in and they were like, right, you can talk. So I read one story and they were dead quiet. And there's one person, that was good, get him here. So I read another one and they're like, oh, see that boy that was in your story, by it? That's like me. And see that lassie? My mom did the same thing to me that get done to her. And I was just like, oh, they're getting it. Other people that had maybe been to uni and hadn't had that lived experience, that were like, you know, who were using big fancy to talk about my stories and my books weren't getting it in the same way that these 15-year-olds were getting it. And I think that was, for me, that was the most exciting thing that is actually happened, to have, you know, teenagers going, I experienced the same thing, and they were, you know, a good decade or so younger than me.
It's going to be quite unusual for them to be like accurately represented, though, because when we look at like teen fiction or young adult fiction, like the representations of teenagers are as like fantastical wizards and shit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the savior through the apocalypse. And all these other, you know what I mean? Like, nobody actually like. Well, I'm not saying nobody, but I'm nowhere a hell of a lot of people actually representing teenagers as just how they are. You know what I mean? So I think that'd be quite powerful for a lot of them to have somebody talk to them in their own terms like that.
I think when I was a teenager and people were giving me books like Sweet Valley High, and I'm like, what the fuck am I meant to be doing with this? We're just like Elizabeth and somebody that's a twin, and they go to all these places and they've got all this money, and I'm like, what you gave me this book for? Do we know anything like that? And like pals of mine were like, oh, well, you're in the hospital, we thought we'd bring you a book. And I'm like, but do you actually read this? And I'm like, well, there's nothing else to read about us. I need to write it then.
Yeah, it's not Twilight and Harry Potter, but the reality for the majority of teenagers is something very, very different. And the kids that you're talking about, the ones that have been edged out of school, I remember those kids getting taken to building sites and get taken to places like, let's get them an apprenticeship, because it's all you're telling them is that you're a lost cause and manual labour is the way for you. Do you know what I mean? That's must be quite shocking, like, to get separated like that. And to hear that somebody's went in and read some short stories and they've got it, it's like, stop doing this to children. Like, stop, like give them a chance, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? I think that thankfully we're starting to move towards a more informed way of, you know, like things like bad behaviour. It's not, it's not a bad kid, you know, like what's going on in the kid's home. But it is 2020, and like you're saying, it's been like the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. It's just generations of people.
Is it no 2021?
Oh, it's 2021. I just deleting last year out my memory.
Sorry, it was shite anyway, so might as well ban it.
Just deleting it, but like that's great now. But like you're saying, that there's been people that have been kind of left behind, and that's really encouraging to hear. And we've spoke recently with people where the best music came out of the working class communities. Like the best art comes for these adverse backgrounds. That's what really it really inspires people to do these things. So it's really encouraging to hear that you actually experienced that firsthand with people, and that they got it a decade later. Like you're saying, it's the same stuff.
I mean, I haven't spoken to any teenagers recently. I haven't had any feedback from any teenagers, but I mean, the book's just kind of landed. So I've had one person the day said they finished it. So I don't know. I mean, my sister works in Trinity High in Renfrew, and she was saying there was some of the kids were quite excited, and I was like, well, the book's on sale now. It's a £5. It's a £5 to the end of this week. And somebody else is a school teacher, and she says she's bought it for her class. And I was just like, well, you know, that I'd say, you know, any of the under 15, some of the later stories is a bit mature. And she's like, oh, we're doing it now.
Really?
I was like, okay.
Fair enough. At least you gave a fair warning. You know what I mean? Like, where can people pick up the book?
They can get it direct through Monsters Regiment at the moment. I know that it will be in shops, but I'm not really sure when. I think because it got cancelled twice for the distributors, we had to start again. I think there'll be some wee shops in Edinburgh will get it any day. But the best thing now, I guess, is to get it off of Monsters Regiment. As I said, till the end of the weekend, they're doing it. Other books are a £5. I think they printed too many copies.
Superb. Have you got this 10 minutes have you got a chance today, maybe the first chapter for us? Is that all right?
The first chapter, yeah.
Just because it finished really nicely on Duck Feet when I was listening to it earlier on. I think it will really give folk the kind of flavour that we're, you know, what you're doing.
Okay, chapter 1, Duck Feet. My dad's got bad feet. He says it's because when he was wee, his mother made him wear shoes that didn't fit him. She made him squash his feet into shoes that used to be his brother's because she couldn't afford to buy new ones for the both of them. He's got curly toes now because of it. They're all twisted around on top of each other, like the placement markets in my hair. You can see all the big blue veins in his feet, like somebody's drew them on with a felt tip pen. He can't bend his toes right, and he has to wear steel toe caps to work in case anyone stones in them. Our school's going to be starting swimming lessons soon, and I can't wait. I can't swim yet, so I asked my dad if he'd take me to the bath to let me practice. He said no. I said, how no? He said, because I can't bloody swim, that's how no. I said, but you don't need to be able to swim to go in the pool. He didn't say it, and much after that, I just pointed at his toes and said, if you were me, would you want to show off feet like that? Swimming baths, pish. They put me down at the shallow end with this pure midnight boy called Colin for one E that looks like he's never had a bath in his life, and this lassie called Harpreet that wears a mad swimming cap because it's against her religion to get her hair wet. I get made to wear these big stupid yellow armbands. None of the boys in my class laughed at me. All my pals were up at the 7 foot mark, doing lengths and diving for rubber hula hoops. I said to my dad, how do you know go to see a chiropodist? A chiropodist, he said. What would I want with a chiropodist? I said, maybe he could help fix your feet, then you'd be able to take me swimming. My dad just laughed at me though. And then he said, a chiropodist would take one look at these feet and chop the bloody things off. I only says it to him because see my wee sister, she'd bad feet when she was away and she managed to get her feet fixed. This guy in the Start Right shoe shop, he fitted her with the wrong size of shoe and she ended up with her toes out and doing like Guruk. It was all because she'd wee skinny ankles and big broad feet, and he packed her toes into wee narrow shoes. My man knew something wasn't right about these shoes, because for a whole week after she bought them, my sister wouldn't stop gurning, and she'd get pulling the shoes off and flinging them out of the pram. We were coming back for the Sunday school one morning, and this guy chased after us, because he'd found one shoe at the top of Ard Road, another halfway down Benica. When my ma took the shoes off my sister that night, her feet were red raw and covered in blisters, and her wee toes were all twisting together like a corkscrew. My dad took the shoes back to the shop the next day, and I've never seen him that angry. I thought he was going to punch the guy's lights out. My sister was lucky her bones hadn't set properly, and the chiropodist managed to gear these wee things for in between her toes. They were like braces made of plasticine stuff, and they looked a wee bit like the jelly false teeth you used to get after the ice cream van. The chiropodist was dead nice, and they made me a bouncy ball out of plasticine stuff for me to play with when I was sitting in the waiting room. There was deep sea divers in the bath today. I swam half a breadth and I stopped at the edge of the pool to watch them. They had snorkels and oxygen tanks and everything. One of them had a pair of green flippers. She was putting them on when somebody up the deep end shouted, "Head up, feet." And then everybody else started laughing. Then Chris Rice from our Reggie class shouted at me, "Hey, how do you not get a pair of duck feet to go with your wings?" That was what gave me the idea. Aye, but how no? My dad said no. I said, but how no? My dad said no, and that's it, finished. I said, but I asked about it and everything, and the guy said it was all right. My dad said, the answer's no, I'm telling you, and that's the end of the story. My dad's never paddled in the sea or walked along the beach and felt the sand between his toes. He's never took his shoes off on a hot day and run barefoot across a scorching hot pavement. He doesn't know how it feels to have athlete's foot in a baruka, and he doesn't understand the pleasure of watching dead skin peel away for the backs of your heels. I just thought, see if he wore a pair of flippers in the bath, then he wouldn't have to worry about folks seeing his bad feet, then he'd be able to come in and watch me swim. It wasn't like I was being funny, I was being totally serious about it, although I did have some job convincing the lifeguard at first. I tried to get my ma on side, but she just laughed at me. Away you go, she said, and don't talk stupid. I said, but what if always wore them on my feet and Dad wouldn't feel so stupid? And who's always? Me, you, my sister, aye, that will be shining, she said. You're not getting me in a bloody swimming causey. I said, but how no? She said, because if I jump in, all the water will jump out, that's how no. The teacher wanted me to try doing it with the armbands. I said, I can't. She said, you can. I said, I can't do it, and that's it. She said, if I managed to break through the armbands, then I'd be allowed up the deep end the next time. I went to stupid rubber armbands. I gave out all the medals for swimming the day. All my pals get ones for 20, 30, 50 and 100 lengths. After we come out the water, the teacher linked us up beside the pool and she shouted the names out one by one. I just stood there looking at the spectators bit. My best pal Charlene's ma was sitting up beside the mirrors and the hairdryer. Charlene was the best swimmer in our class, a right water baby. She'd been taking lessons since she was 3-year-old, and her ma does all that underwater kinetics or whatever you call it. It was bloody freezing, and I couldn't wait to get dried, and I didn't even see the point in staying in there anyway when I wasn't even getting a medal. I was about to walk away when I heard the teacher shouting out Colin's name. How did he get one? I thought, he couldn't even kick his legs in a straight line, never mind swim a length. Then they shouted at Harpreet. I'd get quite pally with her, and I found out quite a lot about Sikhism, which is our next topic in RE. One of the things I now know is that Harpreet is allowed to get her hair wet. It's just against her religion to cut it. And she wears the mad swimming cap to save a lot of bathing, because her hair's all the way down to her bum. Anyway, I thought it was good Harpreet got a medal, because when she first started, she was feared to put her face in the water, and now she can float with the rubber armbands with me holding onto her horns and pulling her along. I was that busy saying well done to her that I didn't hear my own name getting shouted. And Harpreet said, "It's your turn, Kirsty." And I walked down to the front of the line, not really knowing what to expect, because all I'd done was swim a bread, and there was my best pal Charlene, had done 100 bloody lengths. Up in the spectator bit, somebody was cheering and wolf whistling, so I missed what the teacher actually said. She held out this big bronze medal with a yellow ribbon that said, "For outstanding personal endeavour." Didn't really know what that meant, but I shook her horn and I smiled and she put the ribbon there on my neck. My dad was sawing and talking to the teacher when I came out the changing rooms. I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well done." And he pointed at the medal. I said, "Dad, what are you doing here?" He looked at the teacher and she looked at me, and then she said, "Your dad's thinking about taking swimming lessons." I couldn't believe it, so I said, "You're bloody kidding." My dad starts his swimming lessons soon. He can't wait, but he's a bit feared. He came in and sat at the spectators bit at the weekend and watched me and Harpreet. While we were doing our hair, I said to him, "If you come in with us the next time, I can teach you the breaststrokes, that's the easiest one." He said, "Aye, maybe." I said, "Harpreet's dead good at it now. She doesn't even need the water wings." My dad said, "Listen to you two, you pair of show-offs." And me and Harpreet started to giggle. "Aye, well, one thing's for sure," my dad said, and he pointed down to the ones with the flippers and the snorkels that were doing their deep sea diving. "You'll no catch me in a pair of they duck feet."
Hey, that was awesome.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Aye, man.
Like, I honestly, like, best of luck with the book. Like, we've enjoyed really everyone we've seen and heard it so far. Like, if we can do to promote it or retweet stuff, hit us up anytime.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is there are you going to do the audio version of the book?
I hope so. That was when Monstrous Regiment came to me and said, "Can we have the book?" I said, "Can we do an audiobook?" I think with the pandemic and stuff, everything's about like a good 6-9 months behind. So I think eventually, maybe next year. It would have been 2021. We did an audiobook, but
yeah. It's just because, like, I really enjoyed listening to Shuggy Bain. Like, audiobooks is like a thing that I've just came to recently, and I'm trying to get over that whole, if you don't read it, you're not consuming it properly, gatekeeping bullshit. In my own head, though,
yeah,
you need to read it properly to actually say that you've read it. I really enjoyed that, and just hearing you read that chapter. I know that Douglas didn't do his audiobook. He like a voice actor. I think you'd be amazing at doing your own audiobook. Like, you read that so well, but even just the characterizations and stuff were class. So if that does happen, I'll definitely listen to it as well as give it a read before that.
I think there's some people that are maybe stuck with the Scots and find it hard, because one of my friends is saying, "I'm having to read everything 3 times." She grew up in Linwood, but she's saying, "I'm having to read everything 3 times." And I said, but you've come to all my readings, and she's just like, "Aye, but that's just you talking." So I think some people, they're not used to seeing words spelt in that way, and I think the audiobook, it's a missed opportunity not to do an audiobook, and I'm absolutely here for it.
Absolutely.
I'm insisting I do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Thanks very much for doing the podcast. It's been really good, even though with the technical difficulties back at the start.
This is my first podcast.
You're welcome back anytime.
Absolutely. yeah, next book will get you back. But yeah, thanks very much for doing that.
Oh no, thank you. It's brilliant.
Brilliant.
You know you show the fear inside, it grows below the upper line. Oh, you know you try to hold you tightly by my side when all is crashing down. You'll never reach the surface, you live underground. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me. The hope that keeps it all alive is burning bright, and I won't back out. It's day to day, night to night. We have no choice who gets to roll the dice. You'll never reach the surface, you live underground. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me.